This is Cold Start.
And this time, drag racing.
Oh yeah, it's on.
So drag racing is an interesting category within motorsports because, for me, I'm a road course racer. That's what I think when I think motorsports. I think IMSA, F1, NASCAR, that sort of stuff. I feel like drag racing is like the redheaded stepchild. A lot of people forget about it.
Yeah, it's sort of different, right? The mechanics of it, the kind of cars that you see sometimes, just in the world of racing, it doesn't come up in the same discussion often as road racing, oval racing, even dirt track racing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I feel like the crowd that's super into drag racing is predominantly getting older. Like if you think about it, drag cars are those cars from the 50s and the 60s that are all souped up and they got the drag radial tires on the rear and big horsepower V8 engines under the hood. And so I feel like that community, by and large, is starting to die out.
Yeah, what's going to bring younger people into this space, right? Back in the day, you'd have drag racing in the street, right? That's the whole, nostalgic image you have in your head, which is these two cars line up on some road out in the country, and there's a girl who drops the flag, and these two people take off, and that's kind of an old image at this point.
Yeah, and drag racing is like the most simplistic form of racing, if you think about it. Like back in the day, they always say that the first race was when the second car was built. And most likely that was probably a drag race. It's the easiest way to test two cars against one another is just go fast in a straight line. And I think that's why drag racing is kind of gets a bad rep in the sense of not a lot of people talk about it because they're like, well, how hard is it to just go in a straight line? You just floor it. Now, drag racing does have other elements to it that make it really, really interesting because you're building a car to go fast. I think drag racing is more of a mechanical feat than it is weight on the driver just because you're having to build this engine that can produce so much horsepower and build this car that can go so fast. And that's more the appeal of the challenge of creating a car that can go fast in a quarter mile, where the driving piece of it, albeit there is skill. I'm definitely not going to downplay drag racers and the people behind the wheel because I think there's a lot that goes into it, a lot more than probably I will ever understand because I'm a road course racer and haven't done a lot of drag racing. But I think it is more of like the competition between mechanics of who can build the fastest car.
Well, I think drag racing is one of those things where, yeah, from afar it looks like stomp, throttle, pedal, go fast, straight line, stop. How hard can that be, right? But there's a lot of procedure to it. And I don't know, early on in my racing career, if we could even call that, I would also think of myself as a road racer. But, this was less than maybe 2 or 3 years of having done that. A good friend of mine invited me to go try out drag racing. And I decided, well, I'm trying everything in racing I can try. So I would go ahead and do that.
And was that here at Sonoma?
Yeah, at Sonoma. So Sonoma's a road course. Everybody thinks of it as that, right? One of the few road courses they run with NASCAR. But there's a drag strip that runs right down the middle of it. It's impossible not to see it. So Sonoma's a drag strip racetrack, unlike a lot of other places that might just be a drag strip with no road course or anything else nearby. My experience came from a good friend of mine who was a fellow road racer. We were actually Formula 3 racing together. And of all things, and this will age the story a little bit, but his wife bought him a Groupon. Do you remember Groupon?
Oh, yeah. What happened to Groupon?
I don't know. I think they're still around, but I'm not even sure. There's probably some scandal we don't know about. But yeah, my friend's wife bought him a Groupon for his birthday or something like that, and it was for drag racing lessons. And like, what a crazy thing to be able to buy a Groupon for. Imagine buying a gift certificate or something for a friend of yours, and you're like, hey, I bought you this school to go learn how to drag race. What do you think of that? And he said, oh, wow, I'm kind of floored. I guess I'll try it. He had no idea either.
I feel like that's a pretty cool gift, a Groupon NHRA licensing school.
Hell yeah. Well, it was with a specific drag racer and drag racer school that managed to put on a program. They do it all over the place, but they put on this drag racing school at Sonoma Raceway. So this racer named Tom Bear has a drag racing school. If you look him up, the Tom Bear School of Drag Racing. And he teaches people competency in a dragster. And first we should talk about like what the car is, because the car looks like something out of a cartoon. Like if you don't know anything about drag racing, it's one of those really long stretched out looking cars with the bicycle tires up front and the 34-inch balloon tires in back. And it makes a huge noise going down the drag strip in a straight line real fast. My opportunity to do this came in, I think it was in 2019. My buddy Kai said, "Hey, Todd, I got this Groupon. We're going to do this school thing. You should come too. It's really fun." So me and one other guy, we agreed to do it. And so we had a small drag racing school here at Sonoma Raceway. And I didn't know what to expect. I knew nothing about drag racing. I knew less about dragsters. In my mind, drag racing was just that old image from the old movies, you know?
So yeah, walk us through like what is this school like? What are the steps? What are the procedural check marks that you need to do to then get into a license, a competition license for drag racing?
Yeah, I told you I was kind of a nerd and I like to go to school for things, right? So instead of just showing up at a drag racing night, bringing my car and trying it out, I went with this friend of mine to get licensed and competition licensed to be able to go do sportsman or professional drag racing under NHRA. The NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, is the big sanctioning body in the US and internationally, I believe. And they have a certain set of requirements for what it takes to get a competition license in different types of cars. So the type of car that the instructor, Tom Baer, brought out for us was called a SuperComp. And a SuperComp is what I described, that sort of cartoony looking dragster, really long. It'd be helpful if I knew how long and I could say here, but whatever. They're like 18, 20 feet long cars with the tiny little bicycle wheels and the big tires in the back. Generally running big block or, large displacement engines, specialty built. And this school would get you competency to the point where if you did a sufficient number of runs and you met certain criteria, you would be licensed, not unlike if you went through an SCCA weekend and raced cleanly through the weekend, you get your credential at the end. And we did that. We had to achieve 6 clean runs with increasing mile per hour and decreasing total elapsed time that were all considered clean runs in order to be licensed. In a way, it felt like not that much, honestly, but then you get out there and you do a run, and one run, it's over fast, but it kind of takes a lot out of you. And to do 6 of those in a single day and make sure they're all clean, it's kind of a lot of pressure, and you really want to get it right. But among our group, everybody got licensed, so it worked out pretty well.
So you say doing a clean run. What's an unclean run? What would qualify an unclean? Obviously hitting the wall, I would assume, is an unclean run, but like what are some other factors that would be an unclean run?
Yeah, so we need to kind of get into the procedures of drag racing to kind of define this, right? An unclean run would be, as you described, crashing into the wall or going before the light turns green, the things that seem really obvious. But then there's some other things where a clean run requires you to have consistent acceleration down the drag strip, not to be pedaling the accelerator, getting on and off of it. It requires that, you follow all the procedures correctly, including safety procedures. You go in the right order, simple, basic things, but that you have to put all together in this procedure, which, again, feels like a lot of pressure when you're under the gun, on the line, ready to go. There's also a warm-up procedure that's part of your run. It's a way for you to get your tires warmed up, and it's called doing a burnout. And of course, we all know about doing a burnout, like out in the parking lot or whatever, but this is actually part of the sport. You line up at the drag strip. Before you get out on the drag strip, there's this area that they're hosing down with water that helps you clean your tires off, but actually aids in a little bit of slip, which you want. And the goal here is that you're going to fire up your tires in a straight line for a short period. You're not going to go all the way down the drag strip, just through this entry area. By getting your tires wet, you're going to give them a little bit of slip, and then you're going to fire them up and go. And so you get on the accelerator and you stomp it, and you go for maybe 50 or 100 feet, and then you stop and you actually reverse the car back to where the start line would be. So part of that procedure of getting a clean run includes doing a proper burnout and reversing in position to where you need to go to start the drag race. You're looking up at this light tree, the Christmas tree, for an indication of, first of all, if you're in the right place. There's a thing called a pre-stage beam and a staging beam. It's actually a little box on the ground with a light that shines out of it and a receiver on the other side. We've all seen these electric eyes in our garage door openers and things like that. So this pre-stage beam shoots across the racetrack so that it's able to gauge once you've moved into position. So once you've moved your front wheel far enough ahead into position, the first light comes on that light tree. That indicates that you've gone ahead and what they call pre-staged. And the race won't start until both drivers, one in each lane, have staged. So Once you pre-stage, the other driver's kind of fixing up to do their pre-staging as well. Once you're in the pre-staging area, there's a rollout area where you kind of continue to roll forward in these very small increments to find where that staging beam is. And just to give you an idea, there's only 7 inches from the pre-stage to the staging beam. If you think about the diameter of a tire, that's not even getting around one full time, maybe half of a time. So you're having to move this car forward in little tiny increments. Like we call it like nibbling away, like just little bits and spurts. And of course, this is a car that's designed to go really fast when you stomp on the accelerator. So it's not really designed to go slowly and gradually like you would with your road car in traffic. So you get up to the second line and your front wheel crosses that line, and the next light comes on the Christmas tree, the light tree, for staging. And now both lights are being blocked by your front tire, both the pre-stage and the staging light, which covers about a 12-inch total distance. What'll happen is if you continue to roll forward, there's a point at which you've gone too far. That's called a guard light, which is a place which, you know what, you roll too far forward, you're going to get a red light up on the Christmas tree because you're no longer in position for where starting and staging is. So it's kind of tricky to get your wheels in the right place and to figure out the order of these lights. You get into pre-stage. Okay, now you have to be careful because now once you get into staging, the other driver gets into staging, the race is on. Like that light timer is going to start to count down and you go. So you need to make sure mentally you're prepared. You're ready to go once you get into staging. So there's the light tree that's put on both lights that say pre-stage and stage is going to go ahead and start. The way this goes is the Christmas tree works in 2 different ways. There's 2 different kind of countdown styles. There's what they call the Sportsman tree and the Pro tree. The only thing you really need to know here is in the Sportsman tree, there's a countdown where you get kind of like light, 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 go. In the Pro tree, all 3 of the amber lights that are in a row come on together and then you go. So it's just a different amount of time and procedure for kind of the lead up from, okay, you're ready to go to you're going. The next thing to know is that the sort of purpose of the race is to go fast, to be maybe the fastest, but it's also to achieve, in some cases, the lowest elapsed time. That is from the moment your wheel crossed the beam, where you left the box, to where you cross the finish line with your wheel about a quarter mile down the road. So there's another one of these light beams a quarter mile down the road to know when you've crossed that line. And frequently there'll be these big scoreboards right at the quarter mile mark that show your mile per hour and your elapsed time that it took to get from the staging beam to the quarter mile finish beam over that period.
And is there a difference? So you talked about elapsed time, which I think the acronym is ET.
ET, that's right.
So that's your time from the start line to the finish line. Now, are there different types of elapsed time? Because I know that like in certain drag racing, they'll include your reaction time. And then in others, like even though the light's green, you can wait a little bit longer and it's just going to cover your time that you left the light to the time that you cross at the quarter mile.
The timer, the elapsed time, is actually from when your wheel leaves the staging beam to when it gets to the finish beam. That's irrespective of the tree, right? So the tree can be sitting there green and you're sitting there not going anywhere and your timer hasn't started yet.
Got it.
As soon as you pass that beam, your timer starts and then you drive down the drag strip to the finish line, and that's when the elapsed time is over.
So like in other forms of drag racing, like you could have the faster ET but still lose if you're going off of reaction time.
So reaction time, something I'm not sure a lot of people realize is that you could imagine it's yellow lights and red lights and green lights. We know how those work. In drag racing, you don't actually wait for the green to go. Well, you kind of do. Your car does. There's a measurable amount of time, if we're talking about thousandths of a second, between when you get on the gas or when you release the brake to when the car actually starts to move.
Yeah, there's a car reaction time and there's your reaction time, and trying to anticipate everything to happen once the green goes. Because if you waited for the green light to come on before you decided to do something, it would take a couple seconds for the car to actually respond to the input.
And what's really interesting, if you don't know about this to start off with, you show up to watch this drag racing, and you're like, how come all the engines fire up on the yellow light? Like people are getting on the gas while it's still in the yellow, but then they don't start rolling until it's green. Well, it's because of this computed difference that exists and the difference in vehicle and driver reaction time. And where your crew chief is able to sort of dial in your car to help get that as close to perfect as possible.
And what are some of the things that the crew chief can change on the car to help that time?
Well, interestingly, some of these cars have computers built into them that are going to be there to help you ensure that you get the right kind of start and that you accelerate at the right point in time. So there's something that they put on the engine called a throttle stop, which is sort of like a restrictor plate in a way, but it helps to sort of bog the engine down until an expected time passes, at which point it opens up the throttle and allows you to fire full power. So there's this weird like half start you'll see of a lot of dragsters where the cars are actually much faster than the goals that they're trying to achieve. And we'll talk about what it means to do index racing here in a minute, but you're trying to achieve a specific elapsed time, or faster in some cases or slower in others, but you're trying to achieve a specific elapsed time. Your car might be much faster than that. It might only take a 700 horsepower car to meet the elapsed time that you're racing toward, but here you are in this 1,000 or 1,100 horsepower vehicle, so you need to make some adjustment for that. Sure, you could try to shed some of your power, but you don't necessarily want to do that. You want to let the engine fire at its full, but there's a way to sort of delay the start. So this throttle stop is used in conjunction with the computer they call a delay box. And your crew chief is going to help dial in the amount of delay between when the green light starts and you actually start rolling, but not at full speed. And then throttle stop is sort of disengaged, at which point the full power of the car is released and you go. So it's sort of this multi-phase start where last amber, you hear engines fire up, the light turns green, you see cars start to roll forward, but you hear those engines kind of bog down at low power. And then all of a sudden they're starting to roll forward kind of slowly. And you think maybe something's wrong with this car. And then suddenly all bets are off. Like the throttle stop is lift and that thing just takes off down the line. And the whole point of that delay is to try to achieve the intended target elapsed time down that stretch of drag strip to achieve the goal time.
So you're telling me that there's forms of drag racing that the point isn't who can go the fastest?
Yeah, that's right. There are classes of drag racing, top fuel, funny car. Those cars are generally out there to go as fast as they possibly can to achieve this distance in as short a period of time, as high a mile per hour as possible. But there's a point where different types of cars show up to the drag strip, and this is part of what makes it sort of inclusive, interestingly. And those cars are all different. They might have different engines, different aerodynamics, different tires, different drivers, but you want to be able to go out and have a race. So they do this handicapping system that they call index racing, where your goal isn't to go as fast as you possibly can with this car, but rather it's to achieve a specific elapsed time. And it's sort of not unlike in other sports that have a handicap like golf or something like
golf.
that. Yeah, my least favorite sport, but I'll use it for comparison for those people who aren't put to sleep by the mention of golf. It's a way so that you're putting a premium on the performance consistency versus overall car speed. The goal is that you know your car so well. Yeah, your car is fast. It's going to come to the drag strip, but it's only as fast as it needs to be and not faster. So the goal of index racing is to achieve closest to the target elapsed time without going under that time. So you imagine if it was a 10-second index and you went in 9.999 seconds, you went under the intended time. You went too fast, and that's considered a disqualification. They call that breaking out if you went faster than the elapsed time for your index.
I don't know, you're kind of starting to lose me here of like, you're telling me I show up to the drag strip, I rip off the line, real good reaction time. I'm supposed to start lifting down the straightaway just in case if I'm going too fast?
For an index category, yes. And
Seems
there's all
so
kinds
counterintuitive.
I know. Well, there's all kinds of restrictions they put in place because, again, you can show up in kind of anything in a lot of these races. So, but now we're going to handicap you based on this system to make sure there's a fairer race. And the goal here is for consistent runs, not necessarily the fastest run, but you're still trying to achieve the fastest run up to that elapsed time, but not under it.
And would you say that like index racing, is that kind of like spec racing in the road course realm where they're trying to eliminate a little bit more of like the money spending of trying to make something just ungodly fast of, okay, let's put a cap on it. Let's shoot for this time target. Let's make it a little bit more about the driver with proper reaction time, good technique, if that's a thing in drag racing, and make it more on like mano-y-mano rather than, engine builder versus engine builder.
That's a really great analogy, right? It is like spec racing for drag racing. The goal here is fairness and the best performance within an envelope, right? In your Spec 30 races, if you showed up with a Spec 46 and you said, I'm just going to see what I can do, of course you're at an advantage. Your car has higher horsepower, maybe better downforce or aerodynamics, or maybe better tires if we're just talking about an E46. But the goal there is, make it as fair as possible by having there be an equal playing field in which now people are going to compete under those rules.
So we talked about index racing. Now, I've heard the term bracket racing or bracket drags. Is that another category of drag racing?
Yeah, bracket racing is kind of what it sounds like. If you can imagine an elimination competition where you start off with some even number of participants and then you put them head to head, and little by little over time, you kind of winnow that down to the two fastest or two highest achieving vehicles, and then they're going to race against each other. Bracket racing is often coupled to this index racing because in order to have there be a fair bracket, you can't have a Mazda Miata out there against a top fuel, nitro dragster. There's just no point in having that race. So each bracket might have its own index requirements for being able to enter into that bracket.
So it's more of like a competition format.
That's right.
Okay.
And this index form is the handicapping that they put on the bracket so that it's a fair competition of like versus like.
Got it. So then that way, not everyone buys the same car and the same engine. Like there still is the freedom and variability from vehicle to vehicle, but you're still having an exciting race.
Yeah, there's still a lot of tuning to do. First of all, your engine can be of any horsepower. It doesn't matter. The goal is that you have to achieve a certain amount of time to get there. So you can have a low horsepower car that you're pushing as fast as you can. There's no delays, there's no lifting, and you're still way over the index time. Or there can be, you have more horsepower than you possibly need. You have more traction. You have all of that stuff. You're going to have to figure out how much to lift, where to lift, how hard to press the accelerator down and when. There's a lot of variables there to figure out. So what they've done is they've created these indices to kind of define the envelope around the performance required for this particular class. And then it's up to each driver and their crew chief to dial the car in for the car's capabilities to get it to achieve as close as possible to that elapsed time. So there's the variability of each driver and their performance, mostly captured in reaction time. That's how well do you respond to that final amber light for when you get on the gas and start rolling when the green light goes, and we measure that in thousandths of a second. And then how long it takes for your car to get from the staging line to the finish line over a period of time, also measured down to the thousandth of a second. What they do is they'll combine the amount of time that is your reaction time, or RT, and your elapsed time in ET, and together they call this the package. So you drove a certain number package, they'll call it. You can say you drove a 100/1000th package. What does that even mean? That means the combination of your reaction time between the amber and the green and the elapsed time added up to 0.100 seconds, or a tenth of a second. That's 100 thousandths. Your total performance is gated by the index. First and foremost, you can't go before the green, and you can't go faster than the index time. So let's talk in specific numbers. In a couple different classes, there's a class called Super Street. Those are mostly, what you'd see like a street car, but it's been modified in some way for drag racing. Those use a 10.9 second index. So right away, if you think about a fast street car, people talk about how fast does your car do the quarter. Under 11 seconds is generally considered to be pretty screaming fast for a street car. So 10.9 seconds is the index for the super street category. There's a category called super gas, which is sort of the next fastest, where their index time is 9.9 seconds. So a 9.9 second quarter mile. And then the category or the class that I competed in is called SuperComp, and that's an 8.9 second index. So 8.900 seconds is the exact target for your elapsed time. And then your package would be the combination of the amount of time over that elapsed time that it took you to get to the finish line, plus your reaction time off the light.
So with the index time, is it your ET can't be under that, or your ET plus your reaction time can't be under that?
It's just your ET.
So the ET, that's the only thing that can't be under it. So
That's
you're
right.
still in a way racing to the line as long as you don't break the ET.
That's correct.
God, okay, this is making a lot more sense. I don't think anyone's taken the time to ever explain drag racing to me. This now makes a lot more sense. So that now it's really just your reaction time to reaction time of who can get, to that finish line first, but you just want to make sure you're not going so fast from beam to beam where the car is overreacting or overcompensating your poor reaction time.
Yeah, that's right. And you could imagine where, let's say both racers get the exact same ET. They both achieve, 0.2 over the index, let's say they get 9.1 second run on an 8.9 second index. Well, if they're exactly the same time down to the thousandth, and they actually have the timers that go to many more decimal places than that, they'll look at reaction time and combine that with your elapsed time to evaluate the overall winner, who didn't get disqualified, who had the elapsed time as close to the index without going under the index, and how much reaction time did it take you to get off the line added to that. So that's that combination that they call the package.
Got it. Okay.
And then there's index classes where your index is set by you. And this is not necessarily index racing per class, but this is more like bracket racing where you'll have two cars that are going to go up against each other. They might not be equivalently matched in terms of their power or their ability to achieve an ET. So each driver will, what they call, dial in their own index. They'll literally write with like grease pencil or shoe polish or something that shows up on the side of their car or the window on their car what their intended elapsed time will be. They'll predict it. So your index here is really the prediction of the amount of elapsed time it will take you to drive that, in this case, quarter mile.
And that's more of like the casual racing.
It's not real. I mean,
or
yeah, in a way,
there can be legit competitions where you're racing for money in that sort of format.
Absolutely. And there's a lot more racing for money in this thing than you'd actually expect, even the casual.
I bet you there's a lot of side bets going on too.
I'll bet. So dialing in your car is knowing your car well enough to predict in advance how long it's going to take you to drive down the drag strip. And let's not overlook, different drag strips have different pavement. There's different weather conditions that affect how quickly a car will accelerate. Tires vary. Tire pressures vary. Even atmospheric pressure varies. So all of these things are being taken into consideration by, well, you if you're the sole driver and crew chief, or by your crew chief who's helping to tune your car. And let's say if you're doing this delay box thing as well, to know like what are the characteristics of this car under these conditions to help you achieve the ideal elapsed time.
There's a lot more complexity here. I know there is this simple form of drag racing, which is first one to cross the finish line is the winner. I mean, indexing and brackets and all this other stuff, there's a little more complexity that goes into it of you're not necessarily the winner just because you crossed the finish line first. And then there's even like the type of drag racing, which is whoever can just put down the fastest time regardless of reaction time, right? Of people that are just trying to make the most powerful, fastest things. There's so many different flavors of how to get involved. And maybe that was why there was such a big appeal for drag racing for such a long period of time was it was very approachable, and whatever you wanted to do or whatever type of competition you wanted to get out of it, there was that flavor for you. There was that availability to get into it.
Yeah, there was that race what you brung grassroots kind of approach to drag racing for a very long time, and there still is that. At the top levels, right, where budget isn't necessarily an object, where you have entire teams that are working on single cars, you have high-level, professional drivers, all bets are off on index. We're just going for a fastest possible time. This is where you'll hear about like the top fuel or the top fuel funny cars that are out there running on nitromethane. And just to give you some idea, NHRA at the top fuel levels these days, and for the last several years, have been running 1,000 foot long races. Instead of going a quarter mile, they're running the 1,000 feet because apparently that extra 320 feet that they have to go is enough of the additional acceleration at the rates that they're going that it's just too much. And there's been bad accidents of cars that just don't have the amount of runway they need to slow down and stop, and winding up in the catch fence. So a lot of these, what we talk about top fuel, they're not even quarter miles. They're 1,000 foot race.
What? That's crazy that small of a distance difference makes that big of an impact with that much power that it kind of makes sense of like, yeah, we don't want to redesign the length of the stopping distance of all these drag strips of let's just reduce the distance. That's crazy that they're that powerful, that fast.
These cars now exceed in 1,000 feet, 330 miles per hour in the low 3 seconds, and they're about as loud as anything I've ever heard. So we talked a little bit about engines, right? In a SuperComp car like that I drove, generally big block engines. Chevy big blocks were sort of the recipe of choice for most cars out there. You're talking about a big block, cars that have 550 to 650 cubic inch engines. Now, for those who don't speak that language, let's call that an 8 or 9 liter engine. If you think about your engine on your road car, that might be 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 liter engine if you've got a big one. We're talking about engines that are 9 liters. This is a lot of displacement of fuel that's occurring. And of course, to enable that displacement of fuel, there's combustion that's happening. Combustion is actually what's powering these engines to send you down the racetrack. And now we're giving them nitromethane fuel and building engines that literally need to be rebuilt after every single run, where expense is kind of no object here. We're going as fast as we can go. We're trying to achieve the fastest possible time. These are cars that produce over 7,000 horsepower, and they're using it to try to put that speed down to actually have enough traction to get the tire to stick to the drag strip so that they can drive in a straight line for that quarter mile, so that they can hurry up and get on the brakes, because you got to slow that thing down that was going 330 miles an hour. It's pretty crazy when you look at the physics of it and you kind of just imagine and experience the whole thing. And I've mentioned that it's loud, but one of the quotes I heard from a really famous racer, drag racer named Don Garlitz, who's kind of like a grandfather in drag racing, he said, "It's so loud, you hear it with your bones." And if you've never actually been in an NHRA competition or a drag race like this, you have no idea what loud actually is. I was kind of curious. My first race, I brought earplugs, but I was standing near a building. The Top Fuel folks were going on the racetrack, on the drag strip. They had to be, probably a quarter mile away from me at least, where they were starting, maybe a half a mile away. The sound was so loud that my earplugs did nothing. It sounded like I didn't even have any earplugs. And before hearing the sound, I sort of felt it in my chest. The amount of sound traveling through the air, if you think about sound as waves, this is a wave that will knock you over. It's incredible to experience. And if you haven't done it ever, it's something that's worth doing. Just make sure you bring suitable ear protection. And at least 2 layers of ear protection for these Top Fuel cars that run on nitromethane. You need those earplugs shoved way in your ear that are highly sound attenuating. And then you need those shooter's earmuffs on top of that, just to be able to kind of survive this thing. To give you another measure, I think an airline, like an airplane, the jet engine of an airplane is rated at something like 120 or 130 decibels, like running at full tilt. A Top Fuel dragster runs about 150 decibels, which is to say, if you're standing right next to this with no ear protection, it will damage your hearing permanently.
I will agree with you that you have to experience it once. And if you're a motorsport fan with road course racing or whatever it is, circle track, dirt, whatever, and you've never been to an NHRA event, you're just missing out. I'm not saying become a fan and get super into it, because drag racing is its own thing, but you at least got to go to one event and feel it.
It's one of those experiential things for sure. But for me, it was a complete contradiction in ways, right? Like what I think of as that sort of caveman, stomp pedal, go fast, hear loud noise kind of an idea that we think of, right, as maybe the fundamental way of drag racing or how this all came about. There's actually a lot of intricacy to it. Like the drag strip itself, they have this chemical that they've developed, right, to help increase the amount of traction that you have on the drag strip. So there's this chemical that's been created, or chemical compounds they use, called track bite. Used to be called VHT. I think they call it PJ1 now. It's this resin that they put down on the track to make it sticky for more grip and to help seal it. So if you ever go walk on a drag strip, your shoes will literally stick to it, especially right in the area where people are just leaving from the box, because this chemical that they continually reapply to the surface of the track to increase the amount of grip that cars have so their tires could actually get some bite and take off the line with so much power behind them. The procedure for driving a dragster is very mental. There's a lot of visualization and what I'll call internal talk track that comes along with driving a dragster. You're in your head, you're trying to evaluate the sequence of things that you need to do in a certain order in order to get a good reaction time and a good launch off the line. After which, once you're launched off the line, it's kind of up to how your car is set up and how you gently give it inputs until you're at the finish line for that completion. So there's a lot of things to figure out. There's a lot of time spent in your own head thinking through what button to press, what button to let go of, what pedal to press, what pedal to let go of, in what order to make sure you do that. All the while, the light timer comes on. You have somebody in the next lane over from you that's trying to throw you off your game and have the light turn on before you're ready for it to. There's this psyching out that occurs for the timing of the start of a race between two dragsters, because there's a finite amount of time that's allowed for you to start. And all these things that you need to do, you need to be thinking about and evaluating well in advance of actually getting on the car and going down the track. So there's a lot to think about. It's sort of a contradictory thing. It doesn't look like it's that complicated. It doesn't look like it would be anywhere approaching what I'm going to call a meditative activity. You're so in your head with your talk track. You're so programmed into the things I need to do in what order. The runs are over very quickly. We're talking about 8.9 seconds to cover a quarter mile. You're hauling the mail by that point. I think in the SuperComp cars, we were achieving somewhere north of about 170 miles per hour for the quarter mile to achieve that 8.9 second run. And those cars could do a lot faster. They could run mid to low 7 seconds to the quarter mile if you uncranked them and you just gave them all that you had. But we're trying to achieve that specific index. So the car is being dialed in exactly the way it needs to be dialed in. And it's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to this.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. In like the upper realm of cars for drag racing, like that stuff's crazy. Like the dudes that run the top fuel cars and even the cars that are like 5 categories below those ones, like I understand those are like the fighter jets of the drag racing world. But the ones below those, I mean, like if you're talking anything that's over 1,000, 1,500 horsepower, like that's substantial control to have to be able to get that thing down the drag strip in a straight line, not blowing off the tires, not losing control, getting all that timing down. No, like I think there is a piece of some pretty gnarly ability that you need behind the wheel. Now, for me, and my question to you is, so you did this, right? You did the school, you did some races. What did you get out of it? Like, I feel like, I don't know, it's an interesting thing for me, like coming from a road racing background, like there is this meditative flow state and, there's a really cool sensation that I get from being behind the wheel. I just don't know that I would get that from a drag strip. I've never been in something that crazy, that high horsepower going down a drag strip. So I don't know, but outside looking in, I kind of be like, I don't know, like I feel like that wouldn't really get my jollies going,
Yeah, well, I said it was meditative, right? I'd say it's meditative behind all these other things that are very anxiety producing, right? Like you're going to fire up this car, which is loud and has this 9+ liter engine behind you with 1,200 horsepower, whatever it is. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of anticipation going on. So you're anticipating getting up to the line for it to be your turn. You're waiting for all the cars that are stacked up ahead of you to go. So there's this sort of building feeling happening all the while where you're in line and you're getting ready for your turn. So there's that sort of excitement building. Then you actually get up there and you do your burnout. And doing a burnout is sort of a catharsis, right? Like you've been waiting for your turn. Finally, you get up there and you're not ready to race yet, but you're getting ready to race. And you go up there and you just rip these tires. You're just like, you stomp on the throttle pedal, you hold down this button, the burnout button on the car that helps you limit the RPMs that you achieve when you stomp on the throttle and allows you to spin your tires in such a way that it gets some heat into the tires, it builds some traction, and then you back up. So you got to get that right first. So there's the anticipation to the first step. Oh, I did my burnout. Okay. But now I got to back up into position in exactly the right place so that when I do go, when the light changes, that I'm going in a straight line from the right starting point. So it's this sequence of buildup of anticipation with some release, with a buildup of more anticipation with more release, in this way that it builds adrenaline, right? As you might imagine, there's a lot of adrenaline going through your body when you're waiting for the light to change, you're waiting to stomp on the throttle pedal, you're waiting for 1,200 horsepower to kick in behind you. It's not just 8 seconds or 9 seconds and you're done. It's the build up, it's the during, and it's the after that makes this whole experience. And for me, it was really rewarding and fulfilling to know that I'm part of this equation in my reaction time and how I set up and how I respond. But it's also how well this car is set up and how your crew chief dialed it in for the conditions to try to achieve this. And all the while, I'm doing this up against another driver who's also up against all those other things. So it makes this really exciting sort of complexity in something that seems like it's so simple. And it really lights me up that way. And I never expected to really enjoy this activity so much. I thought, that'd be fun. I go do the school. Maybe I get my license. That might be fun on a lark. I can say I got my NHRA license. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. I went out to do it more.
I think from this conversation, like, yeah, it's opening my eyes that there's a lot more that goes into drag racing than I would think. I don't know if I'm totally convinced that this would be an activity that would rival the emotions and the feelings and the sensations that I get from road course racing, but it's at least opening my eyes to the point of, I'd want to give it a try.
Yeah.
I would want to see what it's all about.
I don't want to say one's better than the other. They're different, right? And looking at one through the lens of the other is actually quite informative, right? Because you get a sense from a different perspective. What's this thing that you're trying to achieve? There is something about it, though. There's complexity and simplicity, as well as there's simplicity and complexity in that sort of contradictory way where you can make something simple really hard or really complicated.
Right.
And in this case, maybe this was something really simple that's been made very complicated. In order to do it well, it's really easy to make something complex, but it's very complex to make something simple. And I think that's the duality, if you will, of drag racing is this thing that seems really simple, drive a car in a fast in a straight line. But it's not just that. And there's these other elements that make it so much more of a thinking type of experience and activity than you would ever expect, than I ever expected. And don't get me wrong, day after day, I go road racing, I go driving on the racetrack on a road course, much more than I go drag racing these days. But it gave me such a thrill in a way. And I'm not a huge adrenaline seeker, but we all need some adrenaline in our life or want it or seek it out on occasion. The feeling that I got, the emotions that occurred in me, drag racing were different than what I get out of road racing. And they were cool and they were awesome. And they were just that. It was a contrast from the things that I've experienced in road racing in a way that felt additive. It felt like I put one more feather in my racing cap, that I tried a different thing. I got a different kind of experience. I enjoyed it enough to keep going back and doing it some more. I got as far as NHRA divisionals up in the Pacific Northwest Division when I was racing. I got really lucky in my one Sportsman professional competition that I had up there, where my first time trial, not even in the eliminations competitions of the bracket racing, but in the time trials like qualifications, off the line, I hit a 0.000 reaction time, what they call a triple zip. So that is to say, I got my car moving at exactly the right time. I let go of the button, or I let go of the brake, or whatever you want to say it was, exactly at the right time when that amber light came on, and my car moved exactly when the green light came on to the 0.000th of a second over a run that I was trying to achieve an 8.900 second elapsed time on for our index. And I finished that race at 8.901 seconds. So I achieved a 1/1000th package in that run, which is nearly unheard of in people's entire drag racing careers, that you got a perfect reaction time off the light and you nearly drill the index to the 1,000th. I felt like such a hero. I listened to the commentary on the broadcast after the fact, and the guy said, wow, I'll bet he wishes that was in competition and not in time trials. And I didn't even realize at the time that, oh, wait, that was just the warm-up for the actual race, that I achieved this level that I'll probably never achieve again in my life. But damn, it felt good to be a gangster.
I was going to say, doing a one and done and just drop the mic and get out of there.
It was so good. The feeling was so cool to know that my crew chief nailed it. I did it right. All of those things came together in such a way that I won first place in that run. Not for the overall race weekend, but for that run. And I don't know, that felt like, how did I accomplish this? This is something I never even knew how to do, not even that long ago. And here I am achieving it on a high level and knowing that I could do it again if I tried, and luck was on my side and the weather conditions were just right and my crew chief dialed it all in. And it was such a cool experience. Getting up on the podium for anything feels good, to know that you achieved something, that you accomplished what you set out to accomplish. And in drag racing, it just looks a little different than it does in road racing. But I found it to be very worthwhile, very, very fulfilling.
Yeah, I think your story is just a great example of, if you're into motorsports, you're into racing, and you have the means and the opportunity to have that willingness to go try other stuff. And drag racing maybe should be on more people's lists. Maybe it should be on mine. Maybe I should be a little bit more open-minded to the drag racing world. We have such an incredible facility here at Sonoma Raceway, and the ability to be able to do some of those events here in our backyard. And I think what's unfortunate is those opportunities are becoming fewer and fewer. It's really kind of sad to see. I don't keep up with drag racing, but I've been keeping up with the motorsport news of a lot of places closing down. Here locally in California, especially Northern California and down in Southern California as well, a lot of the stuff on the West Coast is kind of going by the wayside.
Yeah, just recently we had our favorite California racetracks discussion, and we talked about a couple of racetracks, and we mentioned one, Fontana, that's not even there anymore. That was a drag strip where I had a chance to go do some drag racing. It's, I don't want to say a dying breed, but it's certainly not as prevalent as it once was, right?
Yeah.
I think the culture of people coming into it, the perceptions of this and the portrayal of it in the media.
Yeah, and I really hope that there are still going to be facilities that allow kids to get off the streets. I think that's the biggest thing. And we talked about street racing just a little bit, but if you don't have a place that you get to floor your vehicle and go as fast as you can in a quarter mile in a safe, controlled environment, it's going to push people to do it on the streets. And we've been seeing that, and there's a huge rise here in the Bay Area. We're close enough to Oakland to see all that sideshow stuff happening and, illegal drag racing and people going way too fast on the freeways. Hopefully Sonoma Raceway is going to be able to offer some more opportunities in the future to use the drag strip, to use the facility here as it's intended, and help out that community. Give people an outlet that they're not doing stupid stuff on the streets.
Yeah, and having different ways in which to have that outlet, right? Hey, some people like vanilla, some people like chocolate, some people like strawberry. Some people want it on a cone and some people want it in a shake. But at the end of the day, they're all different ways of enjoying your ice cream, right? And so I think our ice cream is driving cars. And we like to drive them fast. So we're going to do it at the track, or we're going to do it at the drag strip, or wherever we can find to go do that. And it's unfortunate that place I mentioned, Fontana, is no longer there anymore. They used to have this big painted wall, and up on it said, "Drive the strip, not the street." And it was used as a way to help encourage people, kids, really, to learn how to do drag racing in a proper place instead of going out on the roads and doing it. And, there's a lot of good that comes from this stuff too. And there's a lot of contradictions. That's one of the things I found about motorsports in general is you get all types of people, all different types of cars. They're represented each other in different ways. And drag racing is just a different way to enjoy cars going fast in a place that's designed for them to do that. You put different rules around it. It's like different types of ways of playing poker. Like a lot of people play poker, but there's a lot of different games and different flavors of that. So I think it's kind of that way. And I still have an active competition license in NHRA to this day. It's something that I'm proud of having. I don't necessarily affiliate with everybody else who also enjoys this form of racing, just like you don't affiliate with everybody else who enjoys NASCAR or IndyCar or whatever form of racing you happen to be into. Yeah. It's a big tent, and it's one that I didn't expect to see be quite as big as it was.
No, it's really cool. And I mean, having a love for cars, even if these different subcultures, and I think that's what's so interesting about car culture in general is there's so many subcultures and there's so many different facets, and learning about each one of them is something that's super, super interesting to me. And the drag racing community is just another one of those. And it's just like-minded people that love cars and love enjoying cars. They just do so in a different way. And that doesn't mean that their activity is any lesser than another. It's just simply different. And what you get out of it is different. And I would love to be given an opportunity at some point to get behind the wheel of something, some purpose-built drag car and just experience a run and be like, okay, maybe I get it now.
Yeah, even a street car to get out there on the drag strip and to go through the procedures and to go and run has its merits, and I think this sociology of racing would be really fun to explore. Like, I hope somebody's out there writing a thesis on this stuff, the differences of different types of racing and the people who show up to watch it and who are fans of it or whatever. Participating maybe is different than being a spectator in this way. But I'll tell you what, if you want to try this out, you want to get exposure to it, find the racetrack near you, find the drag strip near you. Here at Sonoma, they used to run this thing every Wednesday night, and it doesn't run so frequently anymore, but it's still there. The Sonoma drags still exist. Here in July is NHRA, the Nationals, the top level of drag racing in the U.S., in North America, coming through Sonoma Raceway here in July. You can come see those top fuel cars here and experience those sensations that we talked about, as well as a number of other classes of cars that maybe some of those you've not even ever seen, and you'd show up and you're like, whoa, they turned one of those cars that I really like as a street car into this dragster, and maybe I'm now into this kind of variation of form of driving like I didn't even know existed before. It's pretty fulfilling, I think, to be able to know that there's this world out there, and the more you look, the more room there is for different flavors of this thing to exist in this type of racing. In August at Sonoma, we'll have our next Sonoma Drags events. And then I think we have another one then in September and another one in October. So, it's not as frequent as it used to be, but there are opportunities to race what you brung. Come out to the racetrack, pay your admission, come out here, learn how to do it. Maybe you're going to come out here and find yourself wanting to get your NHRA license too.
Well, I'm glad we finally covered drag racing. I don't know if anyone captured our little Easter egg in the end of a lot of the episodes of pushing off the conversation about drag racing, but I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad we got to, or at least myself, open up a little bit more to a different automotive motorsport community.
Yeah, here to demystify a little bit, what are the actual realities of this thing, and what are the preconceived notions we might have of it, and how can we be maybe a little bit more open-minded to the things that we think are a certain way and are really different than that. I've found that with every form of racing that I learned a little bit more about, I gained a new respect and appreciation for it. I didn't know anything about dirt track, short track racing until we had a conversation with our friend Uncle Strick, who's over doing Euro NASCAR and short track dirt racing and all this stuff. I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. I'd like to know more about that. So maybe somebody will hear this and say, that drag racing thing I haven't been given much credit or paying much attention to. Maybe that's something I need to spend a little more time with.
Well, this has been Cold Start. Thanks for listening.
Hey, thanks, Sylas.
Thanks, Todd.
Good times. And get out there. Go drag racing.